Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. As many of you may know by now, Nigel Farage may have his bank account closed down at any time with absolutely no explanation whatsoever. He hasn't named the bank in question yet, although the rumour is that it's a certain bank that's used by some of the royals, but that remains to be seen. Now, before those of you who don't agree with Nigel Farage jump up for joy, I would urge you to consider that politics and opinion on policies is one thing, but this is a very, very sinister step, and it is something that could affect many of us, because especially those of us who speak out. I may not be extreme, but I, for example, don't hold back in calling somebody in government a moron if that's what I think, and I believe that I should be allowed to do that, and that is why I must continue to do so, because that is our right. We should all be able to express our opinion and have our own opinion on policies without being debanked. That is absolutely tragic. But what is even more concerning is how the whole system works. Many of you will have heard, of course, of the anti-money laundering laws. Now, there's a sort of a two-step part of this. There's the proceeds of crime, which goes back to 2002, and then there's the updated Money Laundering Act 2018, I think. Anyway, the point is that these ridiculous anti-money laundering laws allow banks to use these laws to hide behind, so that they can say that they cannot disclose the reason they've closed your account because that comes under tipping off. And for those of you who may not be aware, under section 333 of the Proceeds of Crime law, if you tip off somebody who is being monitored by HMRC or one of the authorities, you can go to prison for a minimum of 2 years. So it's very serious. But it's nothing to do with anti-money laundering. Once again, our virtue signalling hypocrites in charge are doing one thing or saying one thing and doing something completely different. Because one of the greatest offenders of money laundering around the world is the UK. One of the greatest offenders of tax havens around the world is the UK. We have two of the greatest tax havens within our nation, if you like, the Isle of Man and Gibraltar. And if you've been to Gibraltar, if you stand at the top, at the very top where all the monkeys are, and look down, all you can see is oil tankers, because so much trade is done through Gibraltar to avoid tax. And yet these very people stand on their podiums table thumping about cutting back on tax havens, and they're the worst of the lot. And with anti-money laundering, more filthy money passes through London than anywhere else in the world. And yet they introduce these laws, but everything is not as it seems. The anti-money laundering laws are not to prevent some super wealthy person from getting several millions of pounds into the system, because they'll do that for him for a cut. It is an excuse to be able to shut individuals down. Another step towards totalitarianism. And how it works in the case of Nigel Farage with the banks, if he, or God forbid it were one of you in his position and you wanted to take the legal route to challenge this, you would find so many obstacles, because they would use the anti-money laundering laws as a shield to hide behind. And even if the matter were to get to court, you have to have something which I believe is called an in-camera session, where it's like jury out. Even the defence may have to be called out of the court, and sometimes an independent legal person, counsel, will actually assess the evidence and decide and give an opinion whether there is a case or not. But what that means for you and I is that for the average person, we don't have pockets deep enough to contest this. So once again, we are being screwed down by those in power to actually capitulate to their will. And it's not the first time that this has actually happened. For those of you who remember when the terrorist right to silence law was passed in the 90s, that followed a bombing somewhere in London or on the M1, I believe. And the next day, John Major announced that he was going to introduce an amendment to the law where terrorists would be denied the right to silence in a court, and if they went for a no comment interview, then the judge could direct the jury to consider that, to frown on that and consider that, if you like, an admission of guilt. Everybody agreed, of course, because none of us want terrorists to get away with crimes. The problem is that when nobody was looking, it changed from terrorist right to silence to criminals' right to silence. That was a small change, one word. A small change perhaps legally, but in reality it was a giant leap, because that meant that you or I could be in an altercation, anything, for example, and if we decided that we don't want some untrustworthy policeman to put words in our mouths, and we wanted to go for a no comment interview, then that means that the judge could direct the jury to consider that as evidence that we may be guilty, and that's wrong. But it didn't end there. The 90s, they had a busy time of it, laying the foundations for all of this back then. Then the speed camera appeared. It's for safety. In fact, it was called a safety camera. But I never saw one in front of a school, because people always slow down for schools. No, they don't put them there. They put them at the end of a hidden fast bend so they can catch you out, because it was about revenue. But the sinister element is not that part. The sinister element is that with the introduction of the speed camera, for the first time since the Magna Carta, we went from innocent till proven guilty to guilty till proven innocent. That was a serious step forward and a sinister step, and nobody picked up on it. And we have had incremental changes ever since, and now nobody can say anything, nobody can express an opinion, nobody can do jack shit anymore. I don't recognize the world that we're in. And when we get to the point where these people can close down your bank, which is a fundamental right, and they are breaking the law by doing so, but they basically sidestep the law by using something, say, as anti-money laundering laws as a reason to not give a reason for why they've closed the account down, when in fact they are simply pandering to their friends at the top, because they're the people that they used to engage in illicit activities with barnyard animals when they were at Eton. That's my thought for today. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.